This is the Stolen Goodbyes podcast with me, Karen Rice. This is being recorded remotely due to the COVID-19 restrictions. I'm joined today by Sally Gardiner, who lost her husband to COVID-19, Trevor Gardiner, who was 59 in April this year. Welcome, Sally.
Hi.
Can you take me back to the moment that you met him?
Yeah, we met at our work 2 years ago in 2018, and we became best friends from there. And then last year, we was both going through bad relationships, and we just went out for a drink one day when everything was all ending, and then we just knew that we needed to be together. I hadn't realised, but he knew a long time before that he actually fancied me, but never said. And we went out for a drink. We had our first kiss, and then that was it. Really, it was signed, sealed, and delivered. Within a month of dating, we was engaged, and we booked our wedding for last December, which we had on the 16th of December, which was also my late brother's birthday. So we wanted to make it a joyous and memorable occasion.
And how was the wedding?
Oh, the wedding was amazing. He gave me the fairy tale wedding, just like our life, really. So, we lived full on together. We was never apart, because obviously we worked together as well. He moved in with me, and we got married at Leeds Castle. So we had a big fairy tale wedding.
And your plans for the future at that point?
Plans for the future was we wanted to carry on doing what we were doing. We were looking to possibly getting our own business and moving away. We had looked to move up north. We did find a house, but at the time we couldn't get the mortgage. So then we decided we'd stay down here and then look to try and do a business together down here and just carry on doing what we enjoyed doing, which was always going out, sightseeing, just going on road trips all over the place and going out on a motorbike, because we used to enjoy that together as well. We just enjoyed being in each other's company and going out all the time.
Is there a particular trip that stands out for you?
Our favourite ones was Bournemouth. We love Bournemouth. We went there quite a few occasions for different things. And our last visit there was for his birthday. I took him there for his birthday. So I'd booked a surprise room in this beautiful hotel facing the sea view and everything else. And that was one of our favourite places to visit.
What was his most lovable quality?
There isn't one. I just love everything about him. There was not one thing I could pick that I loved the most, because he was just so full of everything. You know, his whole being was just everything. There's not one thing I could say I love more.
And on a daily basis, is there anything that you really miss about him?
I just miss all that he is and was, because he just filled and made my life complete just by being in the room with me. And we could just sit in the same room and not say anything to each other, but we'd still be able to be speaking to each other and not have to say a word. But we laughed so much. We always made each other laugh, and we was always playing pranks on each other and teasing each other. So I do miss the laughter. And I just miss his love so much, because he just loved me so much. And he was forever telling me, doing little things, buying me little things, writing me letters. It was there's just so many things that he did to make my life so complete.
Is there any particular saying of his, or a phrase, or a nickname?
Yeah, I had a few nicknames. When he would be teasing me, he would just call me, "All right, princess, I'll do it." And as if he was making a cup of tea or something and I hadn't got up to make one. The rest of the time we used to call each other babes all the time, and when we used to tease each other, it was just one of them things. I'd go, "All right, babes," and he'd go, "No, babes," and that was it, and that would start. And we had the other things he would say is that, "Really?" As if you did something that you know he'd caught you out doing or something like that. That would be one of his things he'd say. And the other thing that he used to say was, "Well, we'll just leave it there then, yeah." So especially when he was like messing about, or we had a conversation and then he was like, "I'm having the last word, we'll just leave it there."
Obviously, the wedding was amazing. Did you honeymoon?
Yes, we did. We had a beautiful honeymoon. He took me to Venice. We went there for 10 nights and it was truly amazing. We enjoyed it so much. We were there for when it was flooded. So we had that with the wellies and everything else. And then once it stopped flooding, it was then the drought. So the water was like so receded. So when we went on a gondola ride, it was the day before we were coming home. We left it till the end because he's scared about water. He didn't like water very much. So it was one of our last things that we did. And it was so low, the water. It was a little bit scary because you think, oh God, you can see the bottom, you know. But yeah, no, it was amazing.
Do you recall how he proposed? Or did you propose?
Yeah, I proposed to him. And we had the first thing we had a little conversation. I said, "Well, I'm not going to go out with you until I know that you're in it for keeps." I said, "Because I can't be messed about anymore." And he went, "Well, never say never." And then we was out for dinner one day, and he went, "I really want to marry you. I want to make you my wife." I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, come on then, let's go." And then he got down on. We went and chose our rings, and then he got down on one knee in front of my best friend. And she did video it. I don't know if she's still got the video. I think she's lost it, but she videoed him getting down on one knee and asking me to marry him. And then yeah, that was that.
How did that feel?
Oh, it was amazing, just amazing. I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have found him, and just to have such a beautiful, kind and gentle man, and that gave me the world. Just completed me, and I completed him.
What date was your marriage, Sally?
It was a Monday, 16th of December. Because we worked together and were in the public eye, we both started to feel unwell. He was finally sent home on the Monday, which would have been the 22nd of March, and I was sent home on the 23rd when lockdown happened.
So that was only months after you had got married?
Yeah. And I'd started feeling really poorly. You couldn't put your finger on it to start with. I'd had little symptoms, but there was nothing that you'd think there was anything. You just didn't feel well. We both just thought, oh, I just don't feel right, but you couldn't say there was anything wrong. And then my throat started to get really bad, and then I couldn't swallow, and it was so painful. I called the GP and stuff, and I've got the antibiotics. And they took a full 5 days before I started to get any relief from that. But I lost all my taste and smell and everything. And I had all of the symptoms, but I didn't have a really high temperature, but I had a temperature for me. I didn't have the sickness or anything. But then I was slowly getting better. I was out of breath a bit, but not severely. Then Trevor started to feel severely unwell. So we had 1 week at home, laying on the sofa, and then he took to his bed. So we'd been out of work 1 week. So he then took to his bed because he just couldn't get out of bed. He was so lethargic, so tired and hurting all over. His skin really hurt to touch. So I couldn't touch him because it just hurt him just to even touch him gently on the shoulder or anything. He had a really high temperature. And he was just sleeping so much, and he hadn't realised he'd been sleeping. And then, because he was diabetes type 2, I was then monitoring his temperature and his diabetes, is checking him regularly, making sure that I get the fluids up and everything else, and trying to get him to eat, making him things that was easy to eat because he felt so severely sick. I never had sickness. But he just found he couldn't eat because he just felt like he was going to throw up all the time, and it was just something he couldn't get over. So after about 4 days of that, I called I called 111, and they sent the ambulance out on the Saturday, and they said he just needs to eat. His chest is fine. They did his breathing and his obs obviously with the paramedic stuff. And they said he was fine and he just needs to eat, otherwise he's going to put himself into a diabetic coma. So he forced himself on the Sunday to eat so much, and he did, but he had to lay down on his stomach to just eat a half a jacket potato, and he'd had a boiled egg in the morning and stuff like that, and he drunk so much as well. But he started to deteriorate. Every time he got up to go to the toilet, he was starting to get out of breath, and then his cough started. I didn't like the way he was looking. And then he's scared of hospitals, and he'd said he was worried if he goes into hospital, he's going to die and he won't come out. Obviously, I said, don't be silly. You're going to be fine. They've got all of the medication. They've got the oxygen, and I think you just need oxygen. And I haven't got that, and I can't give you that. So anyway, on the Sunday night, he went to the toilet. I was just leaving him resting. I'd just done all of his obs and stuff. I recorded it. Like, I was doing it every 2 to 4 hours. He collapsed onto the toilet and couldn't get off. So I tried to help him, but he was so proud. He didn't want me to. So I just sort of, got a bowl so he could wash his hands on the floor. And I couldn't get him to stand up, so he crawled back to the bedroom. He had to take it in such a long time. It felt like it took him like half an hour to get back there, but it probably wasn't. But it was just awful witnessing him just, losing everything. I got him back into bed, and then he started to feel sick. And then he needed to go to the toilet again, but this time he couldn't even make to go to the toilet. So then that time I had to run downstairs, find a bottle for him so he could go to the wee, because he couldn't get there. And at the same time, I'm then calling, because the ambulance bloke said, you don't need to call us, you just call 111 unless you get seriously ill. And it made me think that I couldn't call the ambulance, but in the end I just called the ambulance and said, you need to come. But I know he didn't want me to do that, so I was just still trying to run around, trying to make sure he was okay, and at the same time not really telling him. But then he said, you need to call them. He said, I can't cope with this. So the ambulance came. They were lovely ladies. They checked him and they went, no, we've got to take you in. So with that, I started making him up a bag, put his phone and his charger in there and his wallet, thinking he might needed some money. And then they just took him straight into the ambulance. I was following behind down the stairs of the bag and everything. But obviously I wasn't allowed to be close, so I never got to kiss him or cuddle him before he went into the ambulance. But he did manage to just stop and wave to me before he got in there, because I think he also realised, hold on a minute, because I couldn't go, I wasn't allowed. Because obviously I'd just been ill myself as well, so, and then nobody was allowed in at that time. Then when he got to the hospital on the early hours of Monday morning, he had once he'd got the oxygen on, he felt so much better. He was hungry, he wanted to eat, and I was so optimistic. So was he. And then in a couple more hours after that, they'd then done the x-ray and said that they'd got something on his lungs. So with that, he started to panic and get upset, because he said they found something on my lungs. And obviously then I knew he had the COVID worse. But he said they're happy with my obs. They're putting me onto a ward. So, and they said normally they go straight on a ventilator when they go in at this particular time. So we was optimistic. He went on the ward and he was doing okay for a few hours. And then all of a sudden he needed more oxygen than the normal mask was giving him. So they then moved him to a CPAP ward. And he was on that. And then all of Tuesday, his temperature was going up and down, and his obs was going up and down. But then they said, yeah, he just needs to eat. He's not eating. And I said, well, can you not give him a drip? I said, I know he was struggling to eat because he was feeling so sick. And they said, we're giving him all of that medication, so he needs to just eat. I said, well, I'll speak to him and I'll tell him. I said, but I'm happy to make stuff that he can have and stuff. And then when I spoke to him, he texted me late Tuesday night and he said, oh, they're really happy with my progress. They said I'll be home in 2 weeks if I carry on the way I'm going. I said, oh, great, because I can't wait for you to be home. I miss you so much.
So, Sally, you were learning all of this information over the telephone?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, with texts and WhatsApp phone calls. Because in the end he was struggling to text, so then we used to do WhatsApp calls as well. But then when he was on the CPAP mask, he couldn't speak, because you can't talk or anything when you're on that. So anyway, one of the last texts on the Tuesday night was that I'm going to go to sleep now. And yeah, it looks like I can be home in a couple of weeks if everything goes okay. I did say, can they put him onto a drip? And they said they were going to look at putting him onto a food drip so he didn't have the issue with the eating. And then Wednesday morning, I was trying to ring the hospital, and then he WhatsApped me and said, I can't, because this time he was just put onto a normal oxygen mask. And I think I've got texts as well, that he'd messed himself and he can't, there's no nurses around. Can I call them? And I said, well, I'm already on the phone. I'm waiting for someone to answer the phone. I'll get someone to you and I'll ring you back. So I did that, rung him back. I think this was about 8-ish or something like that in the morning. I spoke to him, and he said his throat and his tongue and everything had swollen up. He said, and no one was listening to him. He was trying to tell him last night, this is why I can't eat, because it's so swollen, I can't swallow. I was like, well, you didn't tell me that. If you'd have told me that, I would have said to the nurses last night, you need to give him something for that. Anyway, when they came round to clean him, I watched them sponge his tongue, and with that, watching them do that, it just sent a fear of God into me of he's dying. Obviously never told him any of this.
So, sorry, Sally, were you watching that on a video call or something?
Yeah, on WhatsApp video, yeah. So then we carried on texting for a little bit, and I said, right, I'm just going to ring the hospital back. I want to get an update on your overnights and stuff, and I want to find out what's going on. And then I was on hold, and he rang me again. He WhatsApped me. He said, Sally, you need to get a nurse. I can't breathe. My oxygen's run out. And he was panicking because he couldn't breathe. So I tried to calm him down, just to tell him, take small breaths. I'm ringing them. I'm on the phone. I will WhatsApp you, call you back. Just breathe as little as possible. Just, take small breaths. Don't panic. Just try and keep calm. I'll get them to you. And I rang the nurse, and she said, oh, well, I'll get the nurse. I said, no, you need to go and see to my husband. He can't breathe. He needs oxygen right now. She said, okay, if there's no nurse there, I'll gown up and I'll go in. So then I rang him back on the WhatsApp video and said to him, I said, she's coming. And he said, I can't breathe. I said, yeah, I know you can't, but you've just got to try and just take little breaths, just little breaths. She's on her way. She's got to put all of the stuff on, remember? She's on her way. She's coming. And then within a few minutes, she was there, and she took off the oxygen mask and then put the CPAP mask on him. And then he collapsed back onto the bed. And with that, I said, like, I'll leave you to rest. You just take in all that oxygen now. You've got the proper mask back on, and I'll WhatsApp call you a little while. So he just waved goodbye. And within an hour, I got a phone call from the hospital to say that they were putting him on the ventilator. I didn't want him to go on the ventilator because I just had a fear if he was going to go on that he wouldn't come through it. But they said that he was, apart from his diabetes, he was a fit and healthy man, and they fully expected him to come through it. It's just because he's needing so much oxygen. So that was on the Wednesday. So he went down on the Wednesday. His levels went up. So then they said, he's not in a good way. And then on the Thursday, they said he's deteriorating. We don't think we should resuscitate him if he dies. I said, well, no, you can't give up on him. He's not been. You can't give up on him. So then they proned him, and then he then started to. Proning was when they turn him on their front. So then he started to improve. All of his oxygen levels started to drop and stuff, and they needed to get it below 40% so that he could then start coming down off of as much oxygen and off the ventilator. He'd only been on it a couple of days at this time, and then come the Saturday, they said to me, we don't think he's going to make the night. And that's when my world crashed. Then, so I was living in fear, then waiting for the call of he's not going to make it. But he did. He came through the Saturday night. So I'm like, see, you've got it wrong. He's turning for the better. So they turned him again. They proned him 3 times in the end. They did say they were going to try and get him to Guy's Hospital to put him on like a life support machine to arrest his lungs, because his lungs was full of COVID. And what the problem was, it wasn't fluid, it was swelling. His lungs swelled up so much that they couldn't get oxygen in. So they said that that's what they were looking to do, but they wouldn't take him because his vitals was not in the right score bracket. So there was nothing that they could do, and I've just got to prepare that he's not going to last the night again. But they did say that guys had told them to give him steroids for the swelling, but I was surprised that he hadn't already had them, because he'd already said that his tongue and everything was already swollen. And then Sunday night happened, he made it through, and then we get to Monday. By this time they'd said he's really starting to get poorly. They're not sure if turning him over again is going to help. And I said, well, every time you've turned him over, he's gone in the right direction and he's still hanging on. So can you do it again? So they said they were going to do it again and then monitor it. So they did, but he didn't change. His oxygen levels were still 90%, 100% ventilator. And then with that, my sister came over, because obviously at this particular time where everyone's in lockdown, isolation, I was still in isolation because I'd had it, but my sister said, I can't have you there on your own. So she came over and stayed with me. And then the Tuesday came, 14th of April, and they said that he's now starting to deteriorate. It's affecting his kidneys now. Everything's starting to weaken and get affected. And again, they don't expect him to last the night. Be prepared. We're going to set the video call up now. So I got a video call with him. I could hear all of the machines and stuff in the background. I couldn't see him really properly. I just saw half of his head. I couldn't see his mouth and stuff, or the rest of him. It wasn't close enough to see him very clearly. But I could see the tears rolling down his face when I was talking to him, even though he was still in a coma. They said he could actually hear me. And every time I was speaking to him, his heart rate kept going up because he could hear me. All the time he was on the ventilator, I was sending him voice messages and playing him songs and singing him his songs. And every 11, I kept playing our wedding song to try and give him some encouragement. And the nurses that was on the volunteers side were doing that for me. But when I had the video call, I didn't want him to know he was dying. But obviously I think he knew, because he was crying. And I was just telling him, that he's doing so well, he's fought so hard, and just to keep fighting and to remember our happy place walking along the beach in Bournemouth and remembering our wedding and everything else. And, you're doing really well. I didn't want to tell him he was dying. And then that was the call. And then I had to wait another 3 hours for the call to come to say that he'd died. And I know I asked if a nurse would hold his hand, and I asked for a priest to pray for him as well, because I couldn't be there. I wasn't allowed to go in or see him or do anything. And then he died at 8:45 in the evening on the Tuesday. So within 3 weeks of being sent home from work, I'd lost my husband, and we'd both had COVID. Then after that, obviously, we had to then try and arrange the funeral and everything else.
How did you feel, Sally, about the fact that you couldn't be with him, you couldn't hold his hand, touch him?
Awful, because we was never apart, and being apart from each other, it always hurt both of us, and not being able to text each other was something that we never did. We always kept in contact. So not being able to physically see him and speak to him, even if it was on the video for, the times that he was on the ventilator, was hard. But not being able to be there to comfort him and, just hold him and to be able to kiss him and stuff, it's just something I'm never going to be able to get it back. I'm never going to be able to recreate that part. And I've got to live with the fact that I've never seen him, because I've never seen him since he went in the hospital. I'd never seen him physically since. So the last time I physically saw him, he wasn't well, but obviously, he was walking with an oxygen mask on from house to the ambulance. So I just feel like it's all been stolen away from me, and it could have been avoided. And at least being able to hold his hand, he would have known I would have been there, and I would have talked to him, and it might have helped. and he would have just felt a little bit more comfortable, and it would have probably helped me.
It must be so hard for you to have found the love of your life, you know, to have the wildwood romance, get married, and then, you know, just 4 months later to have lost him in such circumstances and to COVID.
Yeah, it's just so hard to come to terms with. I struggle to still come to terms with it now. I still think that he's going to come home. Doing the wedding tastings for the wedding breakfast and stuff like that. This is what we would have been doing this time last year. And the haunting thing is that it's his 60th birthday in November. I haven't been able to have a wake for him. So I now want to do that for him still, as I was going to do. But now it will be a celebration of his life rather than his 60th birthday. And then obviously I've got our first wedding anniversary to contend with, and he's not going to be here for it. Plus it's on my late brother's birthday, so where it was meant to be such a memorious day to make it a happier occasion, it's now a double tragedy.
That's incredibly hard. Can you tell me what happened? Obviously he passed, and what happened after that, Sally?
I was still having problems. So I had to go to the hospital a week after he died. I had to go to the same hospital, walk through there knowing he's in the mortuary, and have loads of tests done for myself. And I had to go on my own. That was hard. And then I collected his things. That was hard, because then was his wedding ring and his engagement ring and his phone, which brought it home that he's not here, because he wouldn't be without any of those. He never took his rings off, apart from when he washed his hands. And he was such a clean person. We were both a clean people. We was constantly sanitising. So that brought it home as well. I wasn't allowed to see him because they wouldn't embalm them. I could sit with his closed coffin, which is all I was allowed. I went to the chapel of rest to see him, but all I see was his coffin. I couldn't see him, so I don't even know he was in there. I know he was, obviously, but it was just too all surreal. Normally, when you lose somebody, even if it's a sudden accident or anything like that, you get to go and see them. You see their face. You get to touch their hands. I've never got to do that. I was always holding his hand. So I did ask if the funeral parlour would do a plaster cast of his hand for me, which they did. They don't do that normally. But I bought all of the stuff and took it to them, and they made a plaster cast of his hand, which I need to try and preserve, but it just means I can still hold his hand.
That's lovely. Can I ask what keeps you awake at night?
The fact that he's not here, that my world has ended. My heart is shattered in so many pieces, and I just feel so robbed of the future, of everything. And knowing that he's not here, he's not beside me. I still sleep on my side of the bed, and I put all of the little bit of clothes that I hadn't actually already washed under his pillow, and then I make it look like he's there. It's the only way I can.
If you could go back and change anything, what would it be?
It would have been to just not go into work, isolate. If we had the lockdown at the beginning of March, he would still be here. We wouldn't have got ill, and I would have made sure he stayed in. And
how do you feel about the government handling of the crisis?
Really, really bad. So there's just not enough words to convey how poorly they have run all of this, because we was watching it for weeks before. If we'd have stayed at home from the beginning of March, we wouldn't have been ill. That's the only thing I would do differently. I couldn't have done anything different than I did. I did everything I could to try and help my husband, but obviously it's beyond my control, and it was beyond his. The only thing that we had in our control was not to have gone into work and risk losing our jobs and stuff, but our life and our future was obviously more important, and we didn't realise that it was going to take off so quickly with us anyway.
What emotions are you left with now, day to day?
I'm left with anger because it could have been avoided. A lot of people could have been, survived by this by not being exposed. I'm left emotionally broken and empty, just lost and alone, struggling just to get through every day, trying to find a focus on a future that I've now got to redo all again because I'm only 45, so I've got to try and now live as Trevor would want me to, and try and be happy like he'd want me to be, which is a hard thing to obviously try and focus on.
What's the one thing you wish people understood?
This is real. This isn't the flu. This is a deadly disease, and it could take anybody and at any age. And it doesn't matter if you're the fittest person or the weakest person. It doesn't matter what illnesses you've got, really. Yes, if you've got diabetes and asthma and them sort of things, you are more at risk. Trevor only had diabetes type 2, but he was fit and healthy apart from that. I haven't got anything, but I still got it. I had it bad, but I didn't die though. But my age, obviously I was younger, but that still doesn't mean anything. So it can just take anybody. There is no safe place. You just have to be respectful and mindful of this. Anybody could be carrying it and not know they are, but they could be spreading it to somebody that's going to die from it.
A difficult question, but what do you plan to do for your wedding anniversary?
We bought some crystal glasses and had them engraved when we was on our honeymoon. We had them made in Italy, and they're in the cabinet waiting for their first use. So I'm going to fill them up with their champagne that we got. We got quite a few bottles we haven't opened from the wedding that people bought us. So I'm planning to toast to him with both of the glasses. I will still buy him a wedding anniversary card. Obviously, I won't have one, but I'll just have to put anything up, I suppose. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to deal with it, to be honest, but that's the only thing I know I will do is just I'll raise a toast to him and us in the glasses that we bought them for.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, what you've gone through. You're very, very brave, very strong.